Okay.
Okay. Can you still see my screen? Or I should share it again? Okay,
Yes, I can see it.
okay. All right, so I'm just going to like create the basic HTML layout. All right. So the first thing we'll do is like discuss about what CSS is actually is. So CSS simply stand for cascading style sheets. And what that does is that it's we use CSS to apply styles to web pages and web page elements. For example, like we can style the paragraph tags, we can style the H1 tags or the body tag or whatever tag we want to style, we want to apply styles to. Also, it has a lot of like properties just similar to HTML. We have properties that depends on like the color of the text. We have properties that depends on the background of the elements. We have some properties are for borders. Some are like the fonts family or the font type. We'll go through all these during the course, but we also can't complete all the properties in CSS. So we just go through the most important ones, and then just like HTML, they have um similar syntax. I mean, the CSS properties we are going to discuss and the other ones you're going to find, they have similar syntax. So once you understand the most common one, you can apply the same ideology to others. Okay, so the first thing is that how do we create a CSS file? And to do that, what we normally do is that we just create a new file, just like you do in HTML. Then you can give it any name you like, but I'm just going to say style. Then the extension is .css. So unlike HTML, that the extension is .html. So this one is .css. Okay, yeah. So we have our style.css. If I check the file, then I can see that I have style.css in the same folder.
So what you did now is that you created two files, one HTML and one CSS, right?
Exactly.
Oh, all right.
So because we are going to be working on both HTML file and CSS file, so what I'm going to do is that I'll make this appearing side by side.
Okay.
So that way, yeah. I mean, this is actually one of the main reasons why I decided to use this editor, because we can look at the CSS and the HTML at the same time. I can also just minimize this so that way we have enough space. Okay, now let me open it on the web, on the browser, so that you can see what we are doing also. Okay, yeah. So we have the basic introduction. Cool. So the first thing is that how do we create a CSS selectors, and how do we apply those styles to the particular elements that we want to apply the style to. So in CSS, the way um, we write CSS is that there are two different ways. One is there's something they call external style sheet, and the other one is like if you want to write it internal. I believe that we've already done something similar while in HTML class. So we did something like style equals to, then we have like color, then we have the name of the color, say red. And then we've done, I think we did something like this previously. So let's save it. Then if we refresh it, then this changes to red. Yeah. So we did something similar. But most of the class, we are not going to be doing this because most time it's very messy when you're doing a whole lot of styles, when you have a whole lot of styles to apply to elements, and then you are doing this, it's mess up your whole HTML structure. So that's why we are going to be mostly using another file for which is the style.css file. We are going to be using it to apply those changes um to the element. So to write CSS, this is how we write it. We have what we call the selector. So the selector is like the elements you want to apply the style to. So let's say, for example, in this case, I want to apply, let me create an, say H1, and then I say, okay, so let's say I want to apply style to this element right here, which is H1. So that is the selector. That is what I want to apply my style to. So I'm going to have H1. H1 is the selector. And then after that, I'm going to have the open and closing declaration block, which is the curly bracket. So between the open and closing tag is the declaration block. So that is where we declare elements of, that is where we declare the properties that we want to apply to that element. So let's say in this case, I want to apply the color. Let's say I want to apply another color to it. Let's say the color of this H1, I want it to be green. Now, this color is the CSS property. This is a CSS property. And then this is the value. Between the CSS property and the value, you're going to have a column. So that column is what is now going to say, oh, it's just like an equals to, you saying like, okay, color equals to green. But in the case of CSS, we don't actually use it like that, but we use column instead. So when you have the CSS property color, you have your column, and then you have the value for that CSS property. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense.
Okay, now,
So,
yeah,
but what is the case when you have more than H1 in your HTML?
exactly. So in those cases, we are also going to talk more about, like I believe we discussed a little bit about class and IDs in
Yes.
HTML. Yeah, so you see the importance of it in CSS, why it is like important. That's what we are going to use to differentiate between different like we want to group an element together, but let's say for example we have an h1 tag, but we also have h1 tags in other places, but we don't want to apply those elements to it, so we are going to use something like class or IDs to differentiate them and all those stuff, but we'll get there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So after after writing the value for that CSS properties, then you are going to have the semicolon. So the semicolon just signifies that that is the end of that property declaration. So basically, this is CSS syntax. This is the syntax of CSS. So any property you have, so if I just want to say, I want to generalize it, you're going to have a selector, then you have your open and closing curly bracket. So between them is where your properties, where you're going to declare your properties. That is called the declaration block between those two curly brackets. So then you have your CSS property, then you have your colon, and then you have the value for that property. After that, you have your semicolon, which is saying that is the end of the declaration for that particular property. You can also have more than, like you can have another property apart from this. Say you have property 2. Let's say this is 1, this is value 1. You can have another property 2, and then like that, like that. So you can have multiple properties, but that's just the general syntax of CSS. So I'm just going to delete this and um, oh, I'm just delete. Yep. So we've done this, but now if we go back to the UI, let me refresh this. Now you see nothing applies to it. Like, what's going on? So what we're going to do is that we have different types of CSS. Like I mentioned earlier, that we have the inline, we have the inline CSS, we have the external CSS, and we also have the internal CSS. So the inline CSS, that is what I showed you earlier, that we can say, I can simply say style equals to, then say, for example, color, then say blue. And if I save this and go back to the UI, you see that it did indeed, it changes to blue. Okay, so that is for that. Then okay, so another, after that, I also mentioned the external CSS and the internal CSS. So for the internal CSS, it's just very similar to like the external CSS, in the sense that what actually happens is that you are going to have, let's say for example, I have in my header section, I can have style, and then so instead of writing this in an external CSS here, I can just copy this and then paste it here. So if I have this, then if I save it and refresh the page, you can see that it indeed changes to green. That is the internal CSS. But most of these styles, if you have a whole lot of maybe style to apply to your page, it's easy to get messy. You know, your page is very, very long and stuff like that. It's going to be difficult to keep track and, scroll up and down just to find a particular element and maybe edit it and stuff like that. So that's why the most used version is the external CSS, which is writing your styles in a different document than the HTML document. So, but in this case, for this H1 tag styles to apply to this, we have to introduce um, a link to it that is going to enable this style.css to apply all the CSS properties to the elements in the HTML page. So mostly you always just do this maybe once when you are just starting your CSS page, when you're just creating your CSS page. After that, you don't have to do it anymore. Okay, so after doing this, then if I go um to my UI, oh my God. Okay, let's refresh this. Okay, we still have it, so it means it's working. But let me change it so that we just confirm that yeah, it's working. So let me use um something like brown. And then if I save it and go back to the UI and refresh it, now you see that the color changed to brown. So basically, this is the commonly used approach in in software developing and I mean in web development or web design. This is the most commonly used approach. So apart from this, we're also going to look at
Excuse me, before
yeah.
we continue. So you mentioned something now that, okay, maybe this is the commonly used approach in web developing and software. So
Mhm.
my question is that the approach of web developing and software developing, are they the same or they are two different things?
They are basically the same. The reason why I say they are the same is that in web development, so basically it only applies to websites. That is just what it is. Why for software development, they use it for those who are maybe creating websites or maybe building other types of application, maybe like a mobile or maybe a desktop application. So software is like the general name, but web, you can say a web developer, you can say a mobile app developer, you can
Mm,
say other kind of developer that are much more specialized into okay this specific field. But in general, they are all still software applications, and so they all still a software developer or maybe software engineer.
okay, okay. Thank you
So,
so much.
but it's just that most people always differentiate saying web developer or mm. Okay, so so far so good. Or do you have any question regarding what I just talked about?
I think I quietly understand everything you are talking about, but the only problem I have now is where you use that link, the importance of that link.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this link is like is like the bridge that is linking the HTML and the CSS file together. That is like the bridge. It's like a bridge between two endpoints. So if I remove this link.css and then I save this and go back and refresh this, then all the styles disappears. None of them is going to show. So, but immediately I like bring it back to the page and then I refresh it again. So it's going to show it on the page. So basically it's like the most important part of it if you are using an external CSS, because without it, none of your styles are going to apply to the HTML elements.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah, no problem. And like I said, you just only do it once. Once you are creating the page, that's just when you're going to do it. After that, you don't have to worry about it. Mm. Okay, so um we can we can start applying more styles to this document. Let's say to the H1 tag. So let's say I have the color to be brown and then I want to add another HTML, I want to add another CSS property to it. I can say, since it's a text, I can like increase the font size. Let's say the font size is 10 pixels. And then if I refresh this, yeah, that's very small. So it's 10 pixel. So let's say 20 pixel. And then if I refresh it, yeah, yeah. So it's gonna become 20 pixel. So that's for the font size. We also have like the font the font style. The font style is just basically you can have like italic, emphasize, something similar. We've already maybe talked about something similar in HTML2, whereby we were using tags. But in HTML, most of those designs are very limited. So, but in CSS, we can do much more. That's why it's much more better to do your styling in CSS, like all of your styling in CSS. So just use basic HTML to create the basic elements rather than maybe styling it like using bold, using because you can do all those stuff in CSS. So just do it in CSS alone rather than HTML. So this one is italic, the fonts. Yeah, so now the font style has changed to italic. Um, Another thing we can try is, and I'll also give maybe a like a reference page whereby you can see all the styles and then all the CSS properties, and you can try any one of them and just see their reaction or the way they appear on the UI on the web page. Also, let's try another um property of, we've already written font size. Okay, so let's try text transform. You can have the uppercase. And most of these properties, they always have maybe different values. So you can use different value. For example, the uppercase, we can change it to lowercase and stuff like that. So this is uppercase. Okay. So we can say I think we have a lowercase. Yeah, so it's gonna change to lowercase. So we have different value, and we can always use any value we prefer. Also, I can have another property that is very related to text, which is the text align property. The text alignment property just helps to align your text. Either maybe you want it to the left, or you want it to the right, or you want it center. So stuff like that. So one thing, if let me say to the left, if I say to the left, I think it's already aligned by default to the left. So nothing is going to happen. If I even say to the right, also I nothing should happen. Okay, yeah, we have it to the right. So it's taking the size of the elements. It's in, for example, now let me we have body, we have the H1. So it's going to take the size of the parent element and then adjust itself with that regard, in that regard. So for example, this one, the body is like the whole width of the screen. So if it's at the right, then it's going to move to the right. And if it is at the center also, if I refresh this, and then you see that we have it at the center. So let me see, let me create another tag. Let me give it issue. So for this one, let's say I still want to apply tags to it. I can have h2, and then let's say in this case I want the text transform to be uppercase. And then if I check this on the UI, so you have this in uppercase. Also, I can change the font since it's too big. I can change the font size to be, say, let's say 14 pixel or 12 pixel. You can just try different value just to see. So this is going to adjust itself to the size of the size that we have defined in the CSS properties. Do you have any questions so far?
Yeah, everything is okay.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about the combinators. I mean, these tags, it can be anything. It can be a list, it can be a paragraph, it can be anything. So let's talk about combinators. So combinators are like what we use to combine different elements to have the same properties. So let's say, for example, I want H1 and H2 and or let me say I want H2 and the paragraph to have the same color. So instead of me, creating H1 and say, let's for example, I have the H1, I say font, I mean, color rather, we're talking about color. Yeah, color is, let's say, blue. And then I want the same color for the paragraph too. I can now say paragraph, then color is blue. So instead of doing this differently, let's say, for example, in the future, if I want to change the color for both of them, then I have to, let's say I have like 10 different HTML elements that I'm doing this to. Then if in the future I want to change the color for all of them, to be something else, let's say brown. So that means I have to go into those CSS properties. Then I have to go there and change this one brown, change that one brown, change another one brown, change another one brown, up to 10 times or any amount of time. So instead of doing that, what we can do is that we can combine those selectors together and then be able to display, we're going to be able to apply that same CSS property to all of them. So in this case, so instead of having my H2 paragraph, I can simply say I can just delete this over here, and then I can say, okay, well, if you have both paragraph and H2, apply this color to all of them. If we have more H2 elements and we have different, let me just, and before I even, mostly what we're going to be doing is that it's going to focus more on CSS rather than HTML. So I'm just going to copy different texts since it doesn't really matter that much. But what we're going to be focusing on mostly is the CSS properties. Yeah. So let's say I have another H2 tags here, and then this paragraph and this H2 tags, they are going to have the same color because I have combined both of them together to have the same color. So if I refresh the page, yeah, we have H2. This is an H2 tag and this is a paragraph. So it's going to, if I change it to green, then if I refresh, they all change to green. So that's just basically how those, we have different kind of combinators too. So for example, let me create a div. I know, let me create a div container that is going to hold all of this. Okay, so let's say we have a div, and then inside that div, we want we want to apply the same styles to all the paragraph in that div. So this is what it means. We have div, all the paragraph in div, and then we can open and close the declaration block. So if I have this div and I say paragraph P, which is going to now be, say, for example, color red. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this like this. Let me have another div, and then okay. So we have this div. Let me have another paragraph inside of it. And then Okay, I'm going to do something. I'm thinking maybe I should, okay, let me have this. And then I'm going to have another paragraph outside. So I'm going to have another paragraph outside of the div. So we can see how it's going to, sorry, how it's going to affect the web page. So basically, we have a div. Inside that div, we are saying that all the paragraph in this div should be read. If I have another paragraph in the div, I mean another HTML element that is not paragraph rather. So let me say I have let's say we have H3, and this H3, this H3 is also inside the same div. In this case, the property color red we apply to the paragraph, but not the H3 tag. That is the meaning of this statement. So it's simply saying that all the color, all the paragraph in the div should be red. Okay, now let me refresh the page. Now, if you notice, we have, this is the paragraph we have inside the div. It is red. This is an introduction to CSS, is inside another div, right? It's inside this div, and the same applies to it because it's inside a div tag. And we have this H3 element inside that div tag, but if you look at it, the H3 the H3 tag is still the same color without any change, the default black color. And it's also inside the div, so it's not going to be affected by that declaration. But if you look at this paragraph, this is a paragraph, it is green. But why? That is because we specify here that when we have a paragraph, it should be color green. So that's why that particular color is also applying to this that is outside the div. Let me just in a div to differentiate the one inside the div and the one not in the div. Okay. 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 Yeah. So this one is inside the div, this is inside the div. This is also inside the div, but not the same properties going to apply to them. Okay, that is for that. Another one we can also do is that we can have a div and then use the greater sign symbol with the name of the element of the selector. So we can say, let's say this is color. Let me use yellow in this case. So in this case, what we're saying is that you should select all the paragraph that is inside the div where the parent, so we are saying that select all the paragraph where the parent is the div. So like this paragraph, the parent is a div. This paragraph, the parent is a div. So let's say let me put another statement here. Let's say we have an article. I don't know if you guys maybe talked about this, but let me just have it here. So let me say this paragraph is inside an article. So what that means is that this article is the parent to this paragraph. Not the div is not the parent to this paragraph. So the div is no more the parent to this paragraph. This article is the parent. But this statement is saying that apply this property to all the paragraph where div is the parent to that particular paragraph. So let's see what this is going to give us. Yeah. Oh, man, let me change the color. It's too bright, kind of. Let's use purple. Okay. Yeah. So now, okay, we have, this is an introduction to CSS. Let's start from there and see if that is the parent. This is an introduction to CSS. The paragraph, the parent is a div. The parent is a div. So that's why this property applies to it. Then the second one we have this is a paragraph in a div. This is a paragraph in a div. This is a paragraph in a div because the div is the parent of this paragraph. This one also, this paragraph, the div is the parent. But this paragraph, the div is not the parent. The article is the parent. So that is why here the style does not apply to it. Do you get it? Like, because this kind of a little bit confusing, but
Yeah, parent inside parent.
exactly. So okay, so we can also look at class and IDs before we like maybe call it a day, something. Yeah, it's two already. So let's look at class and IDs. Um, in HTML, so we in HTML properties, we normally add class to the class or ID to the HTML tags itself, or maybe so it's just like a property to an HTML tag, the class and the IDs. But one thing we can do with it is that it can also act as a selector for CSS. So we can use it as a selector and then apply style to those elements that has that property of maybe the class or the IDs. So the first one we're going to talk about is the class. So let's say, for example, I have a class. I don't want this to get too crowded. Let me use another div for it. Okay, so let's have just gonna write. Okay, so let's say we have this, we have this. Yeah, let me just have these two values here. And then let's say we have another div. Let me another div. Yes. I'll just put this one. Okay, so that we can differentiate it on the UI. So here, I'm just going to give it a class of, let me say we give it a class of div1. It can be any name, but let's say div1. If I save it and refresh, nothing happens because we've not really declared. Yeah, this one is the one we've previously done, but let me comment it out so that it doesn't get into our way of understanding this. Mm. And also to comment in CSS. So this is how you comment. You have this, and then you have this. So if I comment this out and then I refresh, then the styles for all of this is gone, but the styles for this still remains because we still have the H1 over here. The H2, the style also still applies, but because the color has been removed, which is here, it has been commented out. So, okay. So for the class, we have the class of div1 here.
Uh,
Then let's say,
excuse me.
yep,
So what if you want to break that comment? So let's say, so you see that we commented like uh three section, right?
yep.
So let's assume that we just want to comment only the third section and we want 4 and 5 to be active. So how can we
Okay.
break that comment?
Yeah, so what you can do is you can just move this one to, let's say, for example, this place, then only this section is commented out.
Oh,
Is that what you mean?
yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. So you can just put it like this, and then if you want to, let's say, for example, you are inside you have a lot of properties, and I want to comment like this, these first three properties. I can also do the same thing inside of this place.
Okay.
So you can have it like this, be commented out. So you just have to put this at the beginning and this at the end, and then it's gonna comment them
Okay.
out. And you can also have a text. Maybe you want to explain some things you are doing in this particular point. Say, oh, maybe I'm doing something and I don't want to forget it in case when I come back to it, I still want to remember what I'm doing exactly.
Oh,
So you can also put some text and
okay.
comment.
Okay.
So after that, then we have the div class. If we are going to call this particular div, if we want to use it as a selector, so what we do is that we are going to have a dot, and then we're going to have the name of the class, div1. So we do the same thing. We open our declaration block and also close it. And then we have whatever we want to apply to it. So for div1, that is going to change the color to green. So that is going to change the color to green. But if you notice that the paragraphs in other divs are not affected, that is because this div is like saying that we're grouping every element inside this tag together, and then we are applying the specific color or specific properties that we like to it. So it's not going to affect, like maybe we have um the paragraph inside this one, the H1 tag inside this one. We can have any element inside this particular div1 class, and then it's still going to apply the same thing to the rest of them as long as they are all in the same div. That is what it does. So we can group things together, and then we can apply those styling and also formatting of those HTML elements the way we want. And one thing about div is that you can use it in multiple places. So let's say, for example, this class, I want to apply um, this same styles. I want to apply it to another group of elements. I can simply copy or maybe just go there, and instead of copying it out, I can just say, let me come here, and then I'll just say class equals to div1. And once I do this, all the elements inside this class also, we also have a color green, because this class property we also apply to this element inside the div class. So let me refresh it. Now you can see this one is green, and then this one is green, because we apply the same class to both of them. And you can also see that this is also H3, this is paragraph, and they all also pick up those same properties because they have the same class. And we already defined the same CSS properties on them. So that is for the div, but I'm just going to remove this so that, yeah. So another one we have is the IDs. So normally the IDs are mostly used for just like a single element, unlike classes whereby I say we have class here, class div1, and then class div2. We can have the same class elements in different HTML tags. So I can have class div1 here. I can copy the same thing and have it here. I can copy the same thing and also have it here. And the same properties we apply to all of them. That is class. But for IDs, IDs is a little bit different in the sense that you can only apply it to just a single element. So for example, let's say this div, I want it to have an ID. Mostly what they mostly use IDs for is that let's say you have some style that is unique to a specific element in a page. You don't want any other tag or any other um, elements to have that same properties. So instead of using class, you can use IDs just to define it that, okay, this tag is unique to this page, and that is only once I'm going to need it, I'm going to use it. So you can use IDs. But else, if you're going to still want to use the same style in another HTML element, so it's better to use class. So you can use classes in different places and apply the same CSS properties to them. But in the case of IDs, you can just apply it to a unique element that you know that you want to style uniquely. So in here, I can have the ID of div2. So for we to use this ID in the CSS in the CSS file, then you can have your hash and then your div, the name of the ID. Then you have your declaration block. So in this ID, we can then say we want a color, say red. And then if we refresh this, all the elements inside this div, we have these properties. But in this case, we only have the paragraph. So let me refresh this now. So now this is going to become red. So that is just the difference between the class and IDs. Class can be used in multiple HTML elements, but IDs are mostly used for just a just one HTML element that you know that you want to apply unique styles to. Else you can use um, classes. So I think we will probably stop here today. If you have questions, you can ask and we can discuss it. Do you have any questions?
I think everything is okay.
Okay, okay. Let me see. I think I can share instead of uploading and downloading files. Let me use this video. The internet is so slow. I don't know why. So I'm just going to copy and paste these guys here. Yeah, login if you save it. Okay. Yes, I'm just going to paste this link in the chat so that way if you want to look at the file, you can just go to the link and use it here. I'll also paste it in the group chat anyway. So yeah, I think I can stop sharing. Yeah.